Those cement-covered hands created a miracle. He's just a concrete worker. Someone muttered as Ethan wiped the gray dust from his gloves. No one remembers the man who pours the foundation. A few people laughed. To them, he was just another tired construction worker with cracked hands, worn boots, and cement stains that never seemed to wash away. Ethan didn't argue. He simply picked up his tools and walked back to work, unaware that within the next hour, those same cement-covered hands would become the only reason a little girl would ever hug her father again. And when the building began to collapse, every single person who had ignored him would be praying he didn't stop. Those cement-covered hands created a miracle. The wet concrete had already begun to harden around Ethan's gloves when the little girl reached for him again. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking beneath the constant wail of sirens. "Don't let my dad die." For a fraction of a second, everything else disappeared. The shouting foreman, the flashing emergency lights, the crowd gathering behind yellow caution tape, even the crushing weight of exhaustion in Ethan's shoulders after 14 straight hours on the construction site. All he could see were the child's trembling fingers wrapped around his cement-covered hand. He squeezed them gently, careful not to scrape her skin with the drying concrete. "I won't stop trying," he said. Those words weren't a promise he was certain he could keep. They were simply the only words he had left. Only an hour earlier, Ethan Cole had been thinking about nothing more dramatic than making it through another shift. Construction wasn't glamorous. Nobody applauded when a foundation was poured correctly. Nobody posted photos of perfectly aligned rebar on social media. If everything went right, people walked into buildings years later without ever wondering whose hands had mixed the concrete beneath their feet. That was fine with Ethan. He had never chased recognition. At 43, his dreams had become wonderfully practical. Pay the mortgage. Keep his 15-year-old son in school. Help his mother afford her medication. Replace the truck before winter destroyed it completely. Wake up. Work. Come home. Repeat. It wasn't the life he'd imagined as a teenager, but it was a good life because it was honest. Every morning before sunrise, he drove across town with a thermos of black coffee balanced between the seats of his aging pickup truck. He knew every pothole on Highway 17. He knew which gas station brewed fresh coffee before 5. He knew which traffic light stayed red the longest. Routine was comforting, predictable, solid, like concrete itself. His coworkers often joked that Ethan could tell whether cement had been mixed correctly just by listening to the sound of the shovel scraping through it. Perhaps he could. 22. Years of construction had trained his senses in ways most people never understood. He could smell rain 30 minutes before it arrived. He could hear weakness inside old beams. He could judge the strength of freshly poured concrete by pressing 2 fingers against its surface. His hands carried permanent evidence of those years. The skin was thick, scarred, cracked from winters, and burned by summers. Tiny white lines crossed his palms where dried cement had eaten through gloves years ago. Doctors called them chemical burns. Construction workers simply called them experience. New hires often complained after their first week. Their backs hurt. Their hands blistered. Their knees ached. Ethan would smile quietly. "Give it time," he'd tell them. "It doesn't get easier. You just get stronger." His closest friend on the crew was Miguel Ramirez, a man who laughed loudly enough to drown out jackhammers. Miguel believed every problem could be solved with 3 things: strong coffee, hard work, bad jokes, especially bad jokes. That morning had begun exactly the same as hundreds before it. Miguel climbed out of his truck carrying 2 breakfast sandwiches. "You forgot to eat again," he said. "I remembered." "You remembered, but didn't?" "I was late." Miguel rolled his eyes dramatically. "One day your wife is going to haunt me because I let you starve." Ethan chuckled. "My wife would haunt you for your singing long before that." "My singing is a gift." "It's certainly something." They laughed together while walking toward the site. Tower cranes stretched into the pale morning sky. Concrete pumps stood waiting. Workers wearing orange safety vests drifted through clouds of steam rising from paper coffee cups. Another ordinary day, or so everyone believed. The project itself was ambitious. A new community medical center. 7 stories. Emergency department. Children's clinic. Cancer treatment wing. Ethan liked building hospitals. Schools too. There was something meaningful about knowing thousands of strangers would someday find hope inside walls his team had helped create. Every beam mattered. Every measurement mattered. Mistakes weren't simply expensive. They could cost lives. Years later, that responsibility never frightened him. It motivated him. Around mid-morning, the weather changed. The wind arrived first. Sharp, cold, persistent. Dark clouds rolled across the horizon much faster than forecast. The site's supervisor checked his phone repeatedly. We've got maybe 2 hours before lightning. Keep moving. Construction schedules rarely waited for perfect weather. Concrete had already been ordered. Steel deliveries had already arrived. Stopping meant thousands of dollars lost. So the crew continued. By noon, the first layer of rain began falling. Not enough to halt work, just enough to make every surface slippery. Ethan and Miguel were guiding the concrete hose across the third-floor slab when Ethan noticed something unusual. The vibration beneath his boots. Tiny, almost impossible to detect, like a heartbeat hidden beneath steel. He stopped. Feel that? Miguel frowned. What? The floor. Miguel shifted his weight. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, there it was. A faint tremor. Barely noticeable. You think it's the pump? Ethan wasn't sure. Maybe. But something deep inside him refused to dismiss it. He looked toward the temporary support columns beneath the slab. One appeared slightly misaligned. Only a few centimeters. Enough to make experienced eyes uncomfortable. He walked closer. Rainwater dripped from his hard hat. The support beam groaned. Softly. Too softly for most people to hear. Ethan immediately radioed the foreman. I think we've got movement on the northeast supports. The reply came instantly. You sure? No. But I don't like what I'm seeing. The foreman climbed upstairs himself. After a quick inspection, he hesitated. Nothing looked catastrophic. No obvious cracks. No collapsing steel. Only instinct. And instinct was difficult to justify against deadlines. We'll have engineering check it after lunch, he finally said. Ethan nodded. Yet unease stayed with him. Something wasn't right. Construction workers survive by respecting feelings they cannot always explain. Years of experience often recognize danger before logic catches up. He couldn't shake the sensation. At 1 o'clock, the rain intensified. Visibility dropped. Wind pushed loose plastic sheeting across the site. Most workers focused on securing equipment before the approaching storm. That was when Ethan heard it. Not a crash. Not an explosion. A single metallic snap. Short. Violent. Like enormous fingers breaking. His head turned instantly. The temporary support column he'd been watching all morning suddenly shifted several inches. Everything afterward happened faster than memory could organize. Someone screamed. Steel shrieked. Concrete cracked. The floor beneath dozens of workers lurched sideways. Everybody out. Ethan's voice tore across the construction site before anyone else reacted. Men dropped tools. Some ran. Some froze. A section of unfinished flooring collapsed into the level below with a deafening roar that seemed to shake the entire neighborhood. Dust exploded into the air like a gray tidal wave. Visibility vanished. Sirens had not yet begun. The only sounds were falling debris and people calling each other's names. Ethan covered his face with one arm and dropped to his knees as the dust rolled over him. For several seconds, the world became gray. He could not see Miguel. He could not see the stairs. He could not even see his own boots. He heard coughing from somewhere to his left, then the scrape of metal, then a voice shouting for help. Ethan, it was Miguel. I'm here. Can't see anything. Stay low. The floor beneath them shuddered again. That movement was smaller than the first, but it carried a more terrifying message. The collapse was not finished. Ethan crawled toward the sound of Miguel's voice, dragging one hand across the wet concrete to keep himself oriented. His palm struck something soft. A shoulder. Miguel was lying beside a fallen steel frame. You hurt. My leg. Ethan cleared dust from his eyes. A length of metal had pinned Miguel's lower leg against the floor. It was not a main support beam, but it was too heavy for one man to lift easily. Around them, shapes emerged through the dust. Workers staggered toward the emergency stairs. Some were bleeding. One man held his wrist against his chest. Another had lost his hard hat and was shouting the name of his brother. The foreman's radio crackled through the noise. Evacuate the structure. Repeat, evacuate immediately. Ethan wrapped both hands around the frame above Miguel's leg. On 3, Miguel stared at him. You can't lift that. Then help me prove you're right. Even in pain, Miguel almost smiled. Ethan planted his boots against the slab. His back screamed as he pulled. The steel rose only an inch. Miguel dragged his leg free. The frame crashed down again. Can you stand? I can limp. That's standing with personality. Terrible joke. I learned from you. Miguel put an arm around Ethan's shoulders, and together they moved toward the stairs. They had taken only a few steps when Ethan heard a different sound. A child crying. He stopped. Miguel looked at him. What? Ethan raised one hand. There it was again. A high, frightened sob beneath the groaning structure. No children were supposed to be inside the construction site. Then Ethan remembered the group that had arrived shortly before the ring. Donors. Hospital administrators. A local family invited to see the future pediatric wing. The project managers had given them hard hats and escorted them through the ground level. Ethan had barely noticed. Now the crying came again. From below. We have to go, Miguel said. This whole section could drop. There's someone down there. The rescue crews are coming. They're not here yet. Ethan. He knew what Miguel was asking him to do. Choose survival. It was the sensible choice. The trained choice. The choice every safety instructor would demand. Never enter an unstable collapse zone. Never become another victim. Never force rescuers to save you too. Ethan looked toward the stairs, then toward the broken edge of the slab. A cloud of dust drifted up from the level below. The crying stopped. That silence made the decision for him. Get outside, Ethan said. Miguel grabbed his arm. You have a son. I know. You think I'm going to walk away while you crawl into that? Your leg is injured. And your brain is injured. Another tremor ran through the floor. Pieces of concrete fell from above. Ethan pulled Miguel toward the stairs. Go tell them where I am. Miguel tightened his grip. No. Tell the fire department there are civilians trapped near the northeast side. Tell them the temporary columns failed. Tell them the upper slab is still moving. You're not listening. I am. Ethan looked directly into his friend's eyes. That's why I need you outside. For a moment, neither moved. Then Miguel released him. His face changed. The laughter was gone. The jokes were gone. What remained was fear. Not fear for himself. Fear for the friend he might never see again. You come back, Miguel said. Ethan gave one small nod. Then he turned and disappeared into the dust. The stairwell leading downward was blocked by broken boards and twisted railing. So Ethan crawled through a narrow opening near the collapsed floor. His work gloves slipped on wet concrete. Below him, the second level looked as though a giant hand had crushed it. Support frames leaned at impossible angles. Electrical cables hung from the ceiling. Water from broken pipes sprayed into the air. The unfinished walls had become traps of steel, concrete, wood, and darkness. Ethan lowered himself onto a pile of debris. Can anyone hear me? No answer. He moved farther in. Call out. A weak voice came from behind a broken partition. Here. Ethan climbed over a fallen section of formwork. He found a man lying on his side beneath a sheet of plywood. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. Beside him was a girl in a bright yellow raincoat. She could not have been older than 8. The man had curled his body around her when the floor collapsed. The plywood had protected them from the worst of the falling concrete, but a steel brace had trapped the man's torso against the ground. The girl stared at Ethan with enormous eyes. My dad can't move. Ethan crouched. What's your name? Lily. I'm Ethan. Are you a firefighter? No, her hope faded. Ethan forced a calm smile. But I build things, and sometimes building teaches you how to take things apart. He checked the father's breathing. Shallow. Painful. The man opened his eyes. Get her out. I'm not leaving you, Lily said. Sweetheart, no. Ethan examined the steel brace. One end was wedged beneath the concrete slab. The other pressed across the man's ribs. Trying to lift it directly could make the slab shift and crush them both. He looked around for anything useful. A short wooden beam. A length of pipe. A broken concrete block. He assembled them into a crude lever. It was basic physics. The kind workers used every day without naming it. Place the fulcrum close to the load. Increase the lever arm. Transfer force. Move weight. He wedged the pipe beneath the steel. Lily, I need you to crawl behind that wall. She shook her head. I'm staying with Dad. You can still see him from there. No, Ethan lowered his voice. If the steel moves, I need to know you're safe. Helping me means going behind the wall. The girl looked at her father. He nodded weakly. She crawled into the narrow space. Ethan pushed down on the pipe. Nothing happened. He adjusted the wooden beam. Pushed again. The brace shifted less than half an inch. The father groaned. Stop. I have to create enough space to pull you out. You'll bring the ceiling down. Ethan looked upward. The man was not wrong. The damaged slab above them sagged visibly. A crack ran through it toward the main support. Dust trickled from the opening. Every movement sent vibrations through the debris. Ethan needed another method. He studied the steel. One section was attached to a temporary connector plate. The plate had 4 bolts. 2 were already bent. If he could remove the remaining bolts, the brace might separate without disturbing the slab. He reached for his tool belt. The wrench was gone. So was his hammer. He had only a tape measure, utility knife, pencil, and small adjustable spanner. The spanner barely fit the bolt. He turned. The bolt did not move. Rainwater and concrete dust had formed a gray paste around the threads. Ethan gripped harder. His damaged gloves slipped. He removed them. The skin beneath was already raw. He wrapped both bare hands around the tool. The first bolt moved with a sharp crack. Lily gasped. "It's okay," Ethan said. He turned it again. Slowly. Painfully. Each rotation felt like a victory too small to matter. Above them, sirens grew louder. Rescue crews had arrived. Ethan shouted. 3. People trapped. Northeast side, 2nd level. No answer came through the concrete. The building was too loud. The storm was too strong. He kept working. The first bolt came free. Then the second. The brace dropped slightly, but the connector plate held. 2 bolts remained. The father coughed. Blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. Ethan had seen enough job site injuries to understand the danger. Crushed ribs. Possible punctured lung. Internal bleeding. Time mattered. He began turning the 3rd bolt. Then the building shook. A violent groan rolled through the structure. The ceiling lowered. Not much. Perhaps 2 inches. But Ethan saw it happen. "Behind the wall," he shouted. He threw himself over the trapped man as chunks of concrete fell around them. One struck Ethan's shoulder. Pain flashed down his arm. Another shattered beside his knee. Then the movement stopped. For now, Ethan lifted his head. Lily was crying silently. The father looked at him. "You need to take her. I'm getting both of you out. Listen to me." "I am listening. My name is Daniel Brooks." "Okay, Daniel. I designed this section." Ethan froze. Daniel swallowed painfully. "I'm the structural engineer." The words changed everything. Ethan had expected a donor, an administrator, perhaps a doctor. Not the man responsible for the temporary support design. Daniel looked toward the sagging slab. The north load was supposed to be transferred before the pour. It wasn't. "I found the error this morning." "You knew?" "I came to stop the work." Ethan stared at him. "Then why were you inside with your daughter?" "The site manager told me the northeast side had already been cleared." I believed him. His voice cracked. "I brought Lily because I promised to show her the children's wing." Anger surged through Ethan. A mistake had been found. Someone had known. Yet the work had continued. Men had nearly died because stopping the pour would cost money. He wanted names. He wanted explanations. He wanted to drag every responsible person into the dust and make them look at what their decision had done. But there was no time for anger. Not yet. "Is the slab going to hold?" Ethan asked. Daniel looked. "Upward." "No, how long?" "I don't know. Minutes. Maybe. Seconds. Maybe." Lily crawled from behind the wall. "Dad." Daniel forced a smile. "I'm okay." "You're lying." He closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." Ethan returned to the bolts. The 3rd came loose. Only 1 remained. But the final bolt had twisted inside the plate. The spanner could not grip it properly. He needed a hammer. A saw. Anything. He searched the debris. Behind him, a shadow moved. A worker emerged through the dust. "Ethan." It was Miguel. His injured leg dragged behind him. Ethan stared in disbelief. "What are you doing?" "Making bad decisions." "I told you to go outside." "I did. Then I came back." "You can barely walk." Miguel lifted a heavy demolition hammer. "But I brought this." For the first time since the collapse, Ethan felt real hope. Miguel crawled beside him and examined the connector. 1 bolt. Bent. Ceiling. Unstable. Father. Crushed. Girl. Terrified. Miguel nodded. "Normal Tuesday." Lily looked at him. "It's Thursday." Miguel blinked. Even worse. Despite everything, the girl made a tiny sound that was almost a laugh. Miguel positioned the hammer against the connector plate. "1 hit might do it. 1 hit might bring everything down," Daniel warned. Miguel looked at Ethan. Neither man needed to speak. The building had already decided their options. Wait and be crushed, or act and risk being crushed sooner. Ethan moved Lily behind the wall again. Then he placed both hands beneath the brace. When it separates, I lift. You pull, Daniel. Miguel shook his head. Your shoulder is hurt. Your leg is hurt. So together we make one functional idiot. Daniel reached for Lily's hand. Sweetheart, listen to me. She crawled closer. No, listen. Tears filled his eyes. If anything happens, you follow Ethan. No, you do exactly what he says. I'm not leaving you. Daniel touched her face. You are the bravest person I know. I'm not brave. Brave doesn't mean you aren't scared. His voice trembled. It means you keep loving people even when you are. Lily pressed her forehead against his. Ethan looked away. He thought of his own son, Noah. He thought of all the mornings he left before Noah woke. All the evenings he returned too tired to talk. All the times he said, we'll do it this weekend, only to work another shift. He wondered what Noah would remember if Ethan never came home. A father who paid bills. A father who smelled like concrete dust. A father who was always tired. The thought frightened him more than the collapsing building. Miguel raised the hammer. Ready? Ethan planted his knees. Do it. The hammer struck. The connector plate screamed. The bolt bent farther, but held. The slab above them cracked. Again. Ethan shouted. Miguel swung a second time. The bolt snapped. The brace dropped into Ethan's hands. Its weight drove him almost flat against the floor. Pain exploded through his shoulder. Now, Miguel grabbed Daniel beneath the arms and pulled. Daniel did not move. His jacket had caught beneath a piece of rebar. Miguel pulled harder. The fabric tore, but not enough. Ethan's arms began to shake. The brace was heavier than he had expected. Concrete dust mixed with rainwater on his bare hands. His skin slipped against the steel. Cut the jacket, he gasped. Miguel grabbed Ethan's utility knife. He sliced through the fabric. Daniel slid free. At the same instant, the ceiling shifted again. Move. Miguel dragged Daniel toward the narrow opening. Lily crawled beside them. Ethan released the brace and rolled away as it crashed to the floor. The impact sent a fracture racing through the slab above. A deep roar filled the space. The entire northeast section began to fall. Miguel shoved Lily toward Ethan. Take her. Ethan caught the girl and pushed her through the opening. Daniel lay several feet behind them. Miguel turned back. No. Ethan grabbed Miguel's vest. We can't leave him. Together they reached Daniel. The first section of ceiling collapsed behind them. Air burst through the tunnel, carrying dust and fragments of concrete. Ethan hooked his hands under Daniel's shoulders. Miguel took his legs. They lifted. Daniel screamed. Sorry, Ethan said. Don't apologize. They moved through darkness. One step. Another. The floor shook. Ethan's injured shoulder weakened. His hands were bleeding now. Concrete had entered the cuts and burned the exposed skin. He refused to let go. Ahead, Lily waited at the base of a broken stairwell. I can't climb. Ethan lowered Daniel. Go, Daniel said. No. Lily, go. She looked at the height. The stairs above had broken away, leaving a gap nearly 6 feet high. Ethan knelt and locked his fingers together. Step on my hands. She hesitated. My hands are dirty, he said. Not dangerous. She placed one boot into his palms. Ethan lifted. Miguel guided her upward. A firefighter reached down from above and grabbed her arms. We've got her. More rescuers appeared. They lowered ropes and a rescue board into the opening. The sight of helmets and lights should have brought relief. Instead, Ethan heard another crack behind them. The remaining floor was collapsing. 2 adults down here, he shouted. Rescuers descended quickly. They strapped Daniel to the board. Miguel tried to stand, but his injured leg folded beneath him. A firefighter caught him. Then someone grabbed Ethan's arm. Come on. Ethan looked back. Through the dust, he saw movement. Another worker. 20 feet away. Pinned beneath broken timber. A hand reached toward them. Help. The firefighter pulled Ethan toward the stairs. We have to evacuate now. There's another man. We'll come back with a team. There is no time. The hand moved again. Weakly, Ethan recognized the wedding ring. It belonged to Aaron Price, a young carpenter who had started only 3 weeks earlier. Aaron had a newborn daughter. Every lunch break, he showed photographs to anyone willing to look. Her first smile, her tiny socks, her sleeping against his chest. Ethan pulled free from the firefighter. No, the firefighter blocked him. The slab is failing. I know. You go back, you die. Ethan looked at the rescue board carrying Daniel. At Miguel being lifted toward safety. At Lily waiting above. Then at Aaron's hand disappearing beneath the dust. For one terrible second, Ethan saw two futures. In the first, he climbed out. He went home. He hugged Noah. He lived. In the second, he returned for Aaron and never saw daylight again. The difference between those futures was only one: decision. A human life often rested on moments no one could prepare for. No speech, no music, no certainty. Only the question of what kind of person you would become when fear gave you permission to walk away. Ethan turned back. The firefighter cursed and followed him. Together they crawled toward Aaron. A wooden beam had trapped him across the hips. His face was pale. "I can't feel my legs." "Don't try to move," the firefighter said. Ethan examined the beam. It was wedged beneath a concrete panel, too heavy to lift by hand. He looked at his lever. The pipe was still near Daniel's former position. Too far away. The floor tilted slightly. Dust flowed downhill in thin gray streams. 30 seconds, someone shouted from the stairwell. The firefighter tried the beam. It did not move. "We need lifting equipment." Ethan looked at the wet concrete around Aaron. The floor had been freshly poured before the collapse. It was beginning to set, but remained soft in places. He dug his fingers into it. "What are you doing?" "Making space." He tore concrete away from Aaron's side. The mixture burned the cuts on his hands immediately. He kept digging. The firefighter understood and joined him. If they could not lift the beam, they might lower the surface beneath Aaron enough to slide him out. They scraped with their hands. Fistful after fistful. Wet cement clung to their skin. Gravel tore beneath Ethan's fingernails. The burning became unbearable. He continued. Aaron cried out as pressure shifted. "Almost," Ethan said. The word was a lie, but sometimes hope needed to arrive before truth. The firefighter dug faster. The ceiling above them groaned. A chunk of concrete struck Ethan's back. He barely felt it. He imagined Noah asking why he had gone back. He tried to form an answer. Because Aaron had a daughter. Because no one should die alone. Because being afraid did not remove responsibility. Because all the buildings Ethan had helped raise would mean nothing if he could not help lift one man from the ground. "Pull," he shouted. They gripped Aaron's vest. The young carpenter moved an inch. Then two. The beam scraped across his body. Aaron screamed. Again. They pulled. His hips came free. The firefighter dragged him toward the stairwell. Ethan followed. Behind them, the floor split. A section dropped into darkness. The crack raced toward Ethan's boots. He ran. His injured shoulder swung uselessly. His lungs filled with dust. Every step felt slow. The gap behind him widened. The firefighter reached the stairwell first and pushed Aaron upward to the rescue team. Ethan was 6 feet away when the floor collapsed beneath him. His body dropped. He caught the edge with both hands. Pain ripped through his palms. Below him was a broken maze of steel and shadow. "Ethan!" Miguel's voice came from above. Ethan tried to pull himself up. His shoulder failed. His fingers slipped through wet cement. A firefighter reached for him, but could not quite touch his wrist. "Give me your hand." Ethan lifted one arm. The other began sliding. Lily appeared beside the rescuers. She saw the man who had saved her father hanging above the darkness. She pushed between them. "Take his hand." "We're trying." "No. Take his other hand." The rescuers shifted position. Miguel, half conscious with pain, dragged himself closer and grabbed Ethan's left wrist. The firefighter caught the right. Together they pulled. Ethan struck the edge of the slab, rolled onto solid ground, and lay staring upward. For 1 second, no one moved. Then the floor behind them disappeared. The collapse roared downward through 2 levels. The opening where Daniel and Lily had been trapped vanished beneath tons of concrete and steel. Had they waited another minute, no one would have survived. Rescuers carried Ethan out through heavy rain. The crowd beyond the caution tape became silent when they saw him. His clothes were torn. Blood ran from his shoulder. His face was gray with dust. But it was his hands that drew every eye. They were coated in cement. Not like gloves. Like stone. Wet concrete filled the cracks in his skin and covered his fingers to the wrists. Blood mixed with the gray paste. Lily ran beside the stretcher. "Please," she whispered. "Don't let my dad die." Ethan closed his cement-covered hand around hers. "I won't stop trying." At the hospital, doctors treated Daniel for 6 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and internal bleeding. Miguel had a fractured ankle. Aaron suffered nerve damage but kept both legs. Ethan required surgery on his shoulder and hours of treatment to remove the cement from his hands. The concrete had caused deep chemical burns. Several fingernails were lost. Doctors warned that permanent nerve damage was possible. Ethan listened quietly. Then he asked only one question. The others? Alive, the doctor said. He closed his eyes. That was enough. The investigation began the next morning. Records showed that Daniel had sent an urgent warning before the concrete pour. The temporary supports had been installed according to an outdated revision. The site manager received the message. So did the project executive. They discussed stopping the work. Then they decided to continue for 1 more hour to avoid losing the concrete delivery and delaying the project. 1 hour. That was the price they had placed against human safety. The truth spread quickly. News crews gathered outside the hospital. Reporters called Ethan a hero. Television stations repeated the same image again and again. A construction worker emerging from rain and dust, his hands covered in cement, a little girl walking beside him. Ethan refused every interview. He did not feel heroic. He felt tired, angry, grateful. He knew men braver than him who had died in ordinary accidents with no cameras nearby. He knew workers who had quietly saved one another every day. They caught falling tools, checked unstable ladders, spoke up when equipment sounded wrong, shared water in extreme heat, drove exhausted co-workers home. Courage on a construction site rarely looked dramatic. Most of the time, it looked like attention, responsibility, refusing to ignore danger. 2 weeks after the collapse, Ethan returned home. Noah was waiting on the porch. The boy had grown taller over the summer, though Ethan had been too busy to notice. For a moment, father and son simply stared at each other. Ethan's hands were wrapped in bandages. His left arm rested in a sling. Noah walked down the steps. You went back inside. Ethan nodded. For people you didn't know. Some of them I knew. You could have died. I know. Noah's anger arrived before his tears. You always say we have to think before doing stupid things. That's true. So why didn't you? Ethan had no easy answer. He could have said there was no time. He could have said anyone would have done the same. But both answers would have been dishonest. There had been time to choose. And not everyone would have gone back. I was scared, Ethan said. Noah looked confused. Then why did you do it? Because they were more scared than I was. The boy lowered his eyes. Ethan stepped closer. I thought about you the whole time. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, Ethan's voice broke. It's supposed to tell you I knew what I might lose. Noah looked at the bandages. Then he carefully wrapped his arms around his father. Ethan winced, but held him anyway. I'm still mad, Noah whispered. You're allowed. Mom would be mad too. Yes. She'd probably yell at you for an hour. Longer. Noah laughed through his tears. For the first time since his wife's death 4 years earlier, Ethan allowed himself to cry in front of his son. Not because he had nearly died. Because he had nearly left too much unsaid. The months that followed were slow. Ethan could not return to heavy construction. His right hand healed well, but 2 fingers on his left remained numb. The shoulder required physical therapy. Insurance covered part of his wages, but bills arrived faster than recovery. He sold his truck, canceled the cable service, stopped buying anything that could be repaired instead. The public attention disappeared. News stories replaced his. People moved on. Heroes, Ethan discovered, still had mortgages. They still worried at kitchen tables. They still opened the refrigerator and calculated how many meals remained before payday. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. It had no return address. Inside was a check large enough to cover 6 months of expenses. Ethan stared at the number. There was only a note. You built more than walls that day. He assumed it came from Daniel. He called the hospital engineer, but Daniel denied sending it. So did Miguel. So did the construction company. More letters followed. Some included $20. Some $50. Some only handwritten messages. From nurses who would work in the future hospital. From parents whose children needed the pediatric clinic. From construction workers in other states. From people Ethan had never met. One envelope contained $7.13. The note was written in a child's handwriting. Mr. Ethan, this was my lemonade money. Thank you for saving Lily's dad. Ethan kept that note above every other one. 6 months after the collapse, Daniel visited him. He walked slowly but without assistance. Lily came too. She carried a small box. My dad says you don't like awards, she said. He's right. This isn't an award. Inside the box was a handprint cast in white plaster. Small fingers. A child's palm. Across the base, Lily had written, Brave hands do not have to be clean. Ethan could not speak. Daniel stood beside the kitchen table. The hospital board wants to restart construction. Ethan's expression hardened. With the same company? No. The same management? No. Then maybe they learned something. They want you involved. I can't do the work anymore. Not labor. Daniel placed a folder on the table. Safety oversight. Ethan almost laughed. I'm not an engineer. No. You're the man who noticed the support movement before the engineer's warning reached the crew. I couldn't prove what was wrong. You didn't need to prove it to stop the work. Daniel's voice carried the weight of regret. I had the calculations. You had the courage to say something. They ignored both of us. Ethan opened the folder. The proposed role was permanent. Training crews. Inspecting temporary structures. Giving workers authority to halt work when they believed conditions were unsafe. No punishment. No lost wages. No deadline more important than a life. At the bottom of the page was a name for the policy. The Cole Rule. Ethan pushed the folder back. Change the name. Daniel blinked. Why? Because this isn't about me. What should we call it? Ethan thought of Aaron reaching from beneath the beam. Miguel returning on a broken ankle. The firefighter digging through concrete with bare hands. Lily, refusing to leave her father. Call it the second voice rule. Daniel waited. Ethan explained. The first voice is the one that says the schedule matters. The delivery matters. The money matters. The second voice is the worker who says something feels wrong. He touched the bandage still covering part of his palm. From now on, people listen to the second voice. The policy was approved. Construction restarted the following spring. On Ethan's first day back, he stood at the entrance wearing a clean white hard hat. Workers passed him carrying tools. Some recognized him. Most did not. That was exactly how he preferred it. He walked the site slowly. Checked the supports. Asked questions. Listened to answers. At noon, a young apprentice approached him. Sir. Don't call me sir. Ethan then. That works. The apprentice pointed toward the west side. One of the braces looked strange. Strange how? I don't know. It just doesn't look right. The young man expected dismissal. Perhaps laughter. Instead, Ethan stopped the entire section. They inspected the brace. A locking pin had not been fully inserted. It might have held. It might not. No one would ever know. And because they stopped, no one needed to find out. As the worker corrected the problem, the apprentice looked embarrassed. Sorry for slowing everyone down. Ethan shook his head. You didn't slow us down. He looked across the unfinished hospital. You kept us moving forward. A year later, the community medical center opened. The children's wing was filled with painted animals, bright windows, and quiet rooms designed to make frightened families feel less alone. Near the entrance stood a small plaque. It did not mention Ethan's rescue. It did not call him a hero. The words were simple, built by hands that understood every life matters more than every deadline. On opening day, Ethan stood at the back of the crowd. His hands had healed, though scars remained across both palms. 2 fingers were still numb. His grip would never be as strong as before. Lily found him near the doors. She was holding her father's hand. You didn't come to the front, she said. I like the back. Why? You can see what everyone else helped build. She looked at his scars. Do they hurt? Sometimes. Do you wish you hadn't gone back? Ethan considered the question carefully. He did not want to give her a beautiful lie. I wish the collapse never happened. That's not what I asked. He smiled. She had inherited her father's precision. No, he said. I don't wish I had stayed outside. Lily placed her palm against his. Her hand was still much smaller. Warm skin against scarred skin. You said you wouldn't stop trying. I remember. You didn't. Across the lobby, Daniel watched them. Miguel stood nearby on an ankle that still ached whenever rain approached. Aaron held his daughter in his arms. The firefighters who had entered the building spoke with construction workers who had escaped. Doctors and nurses walked through halls that had once existed only as measurements on paper. Ethan looked at them all. The miracle was not that one man had lifted impossible weight. It was not that every trapped person survived. It was not even that the hospital was eventually completed. The miracle was that disaster had not been allowed to remain only a tragedy. People had transformed it into a promise. A promise to listen. A promise to stop. A promise that no amount of money, pride, or pressure would ever again silence the person who saw danger first. Those cement-covered hands had not created a miracle because they were unusually strong. They had created one because, when they could have let go, they chose to hold on. And sometimes, that is all a miracle is. An ordinary person, terrified and exhausted, deciding that another human life is worth one more step into the darkness.